Hello, I'm Daniel Meyer, Music Director of the Erie Philharmonic, and it is a pleasure to be with you on another edition of Coffee Chat. And we've got some really interesting topics to talk about today, most of them centering around the topic of music therapy. And I have some special guests that I'd like to introduce, and I figure I'd just tell you their names, and then they can do their best self-introduction, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dig into the discussion. First up, we have Martha Summa-Chadwick, and we also have Maureen Barber-Carey, and everyone probably already knows Tom Brooks, our director of choruses. He's the director of the Erie Philharmonic Chorus and Erie Junior Philharmonic Chorus, as well as a lecturer at Mercyhurst University. So welcome, panel. How are you all doing today?
Wonderful. Great, thanks.
Fantastic. Martha, I thought we might start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what your official title would be and how your interests revolve around the field of music therapy.
Sure. I'm a concert pianist on paper, but I became interested in music therapy several years back when I was teaching, and one of the siblings of one of my students was autistic. And I found out through a long series of experimentation and later tried and true protocols that children with autism respond to music amazingly. And to put it in a nutshell, this little girl basically learned to speak through music. And at that point, I was hooked. And I went on and got a DMA from Kansas, but they allowed me to take about a third of the degree in music therapy. So I, at this point, founded a nonprofit organization called Music Therapy Gateway and Communications that advocates for bringing music into the mainstream of both education and medicine.
Wonderful. Maureen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Maureen Barber-Carey. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Barber Institute. My interest in music goes back to the time that I was a 5-year-old. I began taking piano lessons at Philharmonic grade school where I went to school. And that continued through grade school and into high school. And I even thought about pursuing music in college, which, Martha, you probably don't even know. But instead, I ended up going into special education. So I've seen the value of music with our students, as well as with our adults here at the Institute for many, many years. Had a great opportunity to work with Martha a few years ago, and I'm really sold on the value of music, both as an instructional tool, but also as an instrument for relaxation for children and adults with behavioral issues, as well as intellectual challenges.
Maureen, if you would, tell us a little bit about the Barber National Institute. I know a lot of people in the area, of course, would be very familiar with the Barber, but maybe some people who are watching are hearing about it for the first time.
Sure. The Barber Institute serves children and adults from birth right through senior citizen age. We serve approximately in our Erie County area about 3,500 children, adults, and their families. But we also have programs in Pittsburgh as well as in Philadelphia. This last 12 weeks has been a challenge for all of us since Governor will close the schools and determine that all non-essential businesses would be closed. For us, that meant that all of our adult day services across the state closed, which then said that all the individuals who live in our group homes, and there are over 300 people who do, in Pennsylvania, they were going to be based at home 24 hours a day. So that brought with it some many, many challenges. But we have a fantastic group of staff, our direct support professionals who work with the individuals, who then are now staffing all of our homes 24 hours. And I'm hoping that Martha's going to give us some great ideas today how we can bring music into our group homes.
Wonderful. Tom, welcome to the chat.
Well,
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been at this a while. As they say, it's not my first rodeo. I came to Erie, as you know, to retire. Haven't done that very well. Martha and I first met each other at the Hart School of Music, and I won't say how far back, Martha, when we worked together as colleagues. It was there that I had my first sort of interest in what music did for people, because I had a private student who sang in my civic chorus who was a psychiatrist. And he had great real interest on how singing played on the brain. And he was doing some experiments at one of his hospitals on how the voice affected people psychologically. and how they seem to change when they were in bad voice or good voice, and what it did to them. And then coming to Erie, recently I've had a number of students that on the college level that have autism that are in the choir, and it's been a very interesting time with them because they become actually some of my favorite students because of the way they've adapted to trying to learn how to make singing a part of who they are in their general life and the disciplines they learn from it and how they can apply it to other things. So that has become a real interest for me in the last couple of years.
Martha, why don't we circle back with you a little bit and get the discussion started? I have to confess that I am a bit of a neophyte when it comes to talking about music therapy. But maybe we can get started here and talk a little bit about how music therapy came to be, and also talk a little bit about the intersection between therapy and classical music, and maybe even talk about some of the composers who struggled and were able to some degree cope with their struggles through music.
Of course, of course. Well, and I think music is striking a particular tone with all of us right now, because during the time of COVID-19 and isolation and quarantine, I think we're really turning to music for comfort and realizing that we can't live without it. And a lot of our listening habits have changed. I know I found myself personally, I generally listen to chamber music a lot, but I found myself listening to a lot of Broadway musicals during this time, and then remembered, oh, that's what I listened to when I was in middle school, and I'd come home and throw on the record player and listen to something like that. So I think, a lot of that, we're becoming much more aware of the values of music. Have any of you found that your listening habits have changed during this time? Maureen, have you found anything?
I actually have just been thinking about that. I do love listening to classical music, but the last 3 or 4 months, I tend to be listening more to background music, something that's really calming and relaxing. It can takes me away from the stressors that I might be experiencing, and just to take some deep breaths and relax.
How about you, Tom?
Well, my interests are always some composers that I go back to that I particularly enjoy, and that's the music of Bach and the music of Haydn, probably because they organize your mind so well. And of course, I listen to a lot of choral music from all eras, Eric Whitacre being one I find as being very moving. And then recently, Susan and I spent an evening on YouTube watching music and videos from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. That was a heck of a lot of fun. It kind of took us back to, other years. Maureen, much as and Martha, as you've said, it brings you back to happy times, good memories.
Good memories.
And so we've sort of enjoyed doing that also.
How about you, Daniel?
I have to confess, my day is so busy being a caretaker for my family, and I was serving as a kindergarten teacher for my 6-year-old. So I've been starving for adults talking about things they know best. So I like podcasts. The news has been difficult to watch just because of the content of the news. But I do appreciate when people think a lot about the subjects that they're speaking of, and I really seek out professionals, and I seek out people who really have a firm grasp of their topic or their subject matter. And that's kind of calming to me to hear somebody talk about something that they know about with some authority. That really brings me a lot of comfort. And that's kind of the thing that I starve for when I go for, I've just given an hour and a half lesson in phonics or counting numbers.
That's great. Well, to put it in context, music for therapy, and I'm going to be getting into a lot of the details of what music therapy is all about, but I think we all understand a little bit more about music as an aesthetic before we started, music as therapy. And when you consider music for therapeutic purposes, we also have to consider a huge body of literature that is out there in Western music that was written by composers who actually themselves had neural afflictions. A prime example of that, the forensic psychologists are pretty certain that Robert Schumann had bipolar disorder based on everything that he did He actually wrote with his two personalities of Florestan and Eusebius. Daniel, could you give us, before I go into the therapeutic element, a brief overview of so much of this body of literature out there that was written by composers who had neural afflictions?
Yeah, I mean, in particular with Schumann, you can actually hear it in his music. There's almost an obsessiveness to the way that he repeats rhythms, and he'll hit them over and over and over again. And it sounds like he's working things out internally through his music. You can also hear that to a large degree, I think, actually in the music of Beethoven. Beethoven, same thing, this obsessiveness with really small building blocks, really elemental aspects of rhythm that just keep coming back and back, almost in an obsessive way, and something that you would never hear in other composers who seem to have a little bit more of a fluidity to the way that they speak musically. Of course, Gustav Mahler, you can hear his neuroses kind of playing out in front of everybody in his symphonic music. I mean, you hear this incredible struggle between the peace and the joy and the love and the exhilaration of, say, being in love with his wife or taking a stroll in nature. I mean, that obvious love of the world around him is in that music, but then also this incredible anxiety and struggle and almost kind of a depression kind of seeps in, and these elements are always at play and always at wrestling with each other, which frankly makes it for very dramatic and interesting music. You think about composers like Scriabin or Messiaen, who said that through synesthesia they can actually perceive colors, and they associate particular colors with notes of the scale, or even with combinations of instruments, which is mind-blowing to me. I can't even imagine what that must be like, or how distracting that could be. I mean, as a conductor, I would think that would be a very distracting thing if I was contending with all these sensories overloads that are happening at the same time, that I would actually have to lead a particular piece of classical music. And then, of course, when you talk about composers with depression, I mean, there are a lot of very famous examples. Rachmaninoff, I think, was perhaps a very obvious one that we have from the last century, where he really struggled, and he actually sought professional help, and through professional help was in some cases able to work his way out of some of the difficulties he was experiencing. And so, but it's interesting the degree to which these things manifest themselves in the composer's music. And frankly, I think in some cases it makes for really interesting and dramatic music to understand and to appreciate that these composers were struggling and dealing with the same sorts of things that we struggle and deal with, but they had an outlet, a creative outlet through which those struggles could be channeled.
That's exactly right, yes. So we've known for centuries, millennia, that music can affect us. The ancient Greeks even knew it with their use of modes for educational and musical purposes. But music therapy as a profession really came into being midway through the 20th century, when musical bands would go around and play at the hospitals during World War II. And it was noticed that the patients felt better when they heard the music. Nobody knew why, they just knew that they felt better. And so then they kept pulling these bands around to then what became the VA hospitals post-World War II. And the music therapy associations actually began and supported people based on social science. There wasn't as much direct knowledge of what was going on with music in the brain at that point. But then along come the 1990s, and functional MRI and EEG and all the wonderful things that we can use to look into the brain. And music therapy literally went from a social science into a neuroscience. And so we can now look and see exactly what's going on with what's happening in the brain when music is happening on that. So what a music therapist will do then is come in and say, all right, we have a goal that we need to meet. How can we use music then to help influence a non-musical task? A non-musical task could be a motor task that could be walking, or it could be a speech task that could be trying to speak after a stroke. It could be a cognition task, just focusing attention. So a music therapist will use music to facilitate a particular goal, to motor speech, cognition, or social outcome on that. And it's really, really amazing to see how it works. Maureen, could I ask you at this point, how do you use music over at the Barber Center, and what outcomes have you seen on that?
Well, we see the use of music variable because some of our children are very much attuned to music, some aren't. But we are fortunate to have on our faculty Julie Moore, who's had a band in Erie for many, many, many years, Tennessee Back Porch. I'm sure some of our listeners have enjoyed Julie's music. But as a teacher for us, her music is sort of the basis of all of her lessons. I can walk in her classroom and see her teaching basic addition with music. And the children are responding so much better than they would have if you had presented to them a worksheet. And so the children are very, very much actively engaged. Please engage, and learning is fun. And that's really a key. Another thing we're doing with Julie is that she, every Monday morning, we have music class, singing, and the children in the various age groups come together and they have an opportunity to spend a half an hour. For some of the children, that's the most important half an hour of their entire week. We also got engaged in doing some drumming. We had Jim Donovan came to B&I and gave us some sessions on the value of drumming, and we embraced that. And as part of our library period, all of our children are participating in drumming. And then what we've seen is attention to task increases, and we've seen a decrease in some problematic behaviors in our children. The act of drumming engages them versus engaging in perhaps a self-stimulatory behavior, such as tapping yourself.
That's wonderful, wonderful. I think the singing is really, really valuable too with all of that. And especially during this time of COVID, we can all sing. You know, instruments aren't required on that. And singing is actually, ancient artwork really tells us that it's an ancient form of communication, music, and that singing was one of the first communicative things that really happened as vocalization started. And how the evolution on that processed was that, you know, we kind of, the brain created the music on that. And then the brain started actually interacting with the music it created. And so then the brain continued to evolve with this music going on with this. And so what we ended up having with this is we have an evolution due to music, not just the aesthetic, but actual growth of neuroplasticity. And how the research shows how this actually works. It's basically based on the rhythm is the most important thing. Okay, when you think about rhythm, you think about a steady pulse, so it's anticipatory, you know exactly what's going to happen next. It's intrinsic. We have rhythm going on in our body, in our heart rate going on all the time, right? In how we walk. Everything is intrinsic with rhythm. And for therapeutic purposes, especially rehabilitational purposes, we each have what's called a functional tempo range. And the close they can get on that is pretty much for a person who is mobile, the speed at which they're walking. For example, you might have a hyperactive child who's walking 132 beats a minute and just really going, and they're going to respond best to music going like that, whereas an older adult might be responding best to music at 80 to 90 beats per minute. So the functional tempo range is also something that we use to help key in on how to use the therapy on that. So this results in physiological changes in the body. We have changes in brain oscillations. So brain oscillation with the music on that. We have motor responses. I'm going to show an example of that in just a second. We have the heart rate can be affected with all of this. And the really interesting thing on this is that using the tempo, you can actually create a therapeutic outcome of change by moving the tempo up or down based on what your goal is. For example, somebody walking with a stroke that you wanted to get moving a little bit faster, if you take that functional tempo they're moving at and you can increase it up to 5%, not more than 5%, but up to 5%, the body will automatically follow it without even thinking twice. Same with a hyperactive kid. If you're running at 132 and you want to bring them down, bring that metronome down to maybe 126, and they'll automatically start to follow. So this is a very powerful thing that can be used. And again, we talked about that we can have motor, speech, or cognition type outcomes on this. And notice that this is not dependent on a diagnosis. Okay, we can have music therapy affecting autism, Parkinson's, stroke, Alzheimer's, all of these things, and they could each have their share of motor problems or speech problems, whatever. So it's really, really powerful how it works. The research has shown that the music used for therapy is going to be the most effective when it is preferred by the participant. So, you know, in this day and age, I mean, I would probably prefer classical music to do therapy with. A young child on the street may prefer hip hop. And if you have somebody with Alzheimer's who can't tell you what their favorite music is, the research again shows that favorite music is probably the music that was going on during the formative years of high school. So it could be the Beatles, it could be Aretha Franklin, it could be, you know, anything like that. It could be that they've digressed enough that they're working with children's songs again. But so how the responses work, I'm going to give you an example of how entrainment works here, a motor response. So if you guys could each just kind of tap a finger on your lap or whatever, find your own personal functional tempo. And I'm going to make a bet we have like 4 different functional tempos here. And then, so I'm going to make a bet everybody all of a sudden started to tap with the music. And this is the power of the entrainment. The muscles just start to work automatically with the music on this. So on singing, when we're talking about singing, again, it doesn't require other musical instruments, so it's a wonderful thing to think about doing at home while we're at home. And thinking about singing, we can think about examples where singing can help with educational processes and also health and medical processes. So for educational processes, let's picture a toddler and they're learning, and this is a neurotypical toddler even, and they're learning the alphabet. And they're saying, okay, it's A, B, C, B, whatever, and not quite putting it together, but suddenly they hear this. And that becomes a chunk, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It literally is a process called chunking. The music will take a group of separate little things, chunk it together. It can go into then from short-term to long-term memory, and the learning process goes from there. We can use a mnemonic in a school and say we want the kids to learn the days of the week. Here, I'm going to date myself. Everybody remember the Addams Family theme? Right? So we changed that to doing days of the week, and then there's Sunday and there's Monday and all of that. I won't sing it through. I might make Tom sing it through, but I won't do that right now. But so we have this wonderful way as a mnemonic that we take a song that everybody knows and says, okay, we're going to put words to it, and suddenly the words help us meet with all this. Names, plants, solar systems, anything that you're doing in school, we can use mnemonics with. So on the health end of things, singing to help people who may be nonverbal or they may have aphasia following a stroke. This is a situation where the stroke, especially if it's in the side of the brain where speech centers are, can severely impact speech. And so you'll hear people just trying to get this out. But people can still sing, because we found that music affects both hemispheres of the brain. Speech is centered on only one, but music affects both hemispheres of the brain. So let me give an example here. We're going to show a video here of a boy with autism. And at this point, he is, I believe, 9 to 10 years old. He's moderate to severely autistic, and he is completely nonverbal except for the words hi and bye. That's all he would ever initiate. His mother found out he loved the song Happy Birthday. And so we were able to actually initiate getting him to sing the word you on Happy Birthday. And here's that video. Now we're going to show a video of the same boy a year later. He had made tremendous progress at this point, and he loved the song Happy Birthday, always had to finish every session with it. And now you're going to see him singing Happy Birthday, trying to enunciate every single word. He's correct on about a third of the syllable, but trying to sing along on every single word.
Make it good. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Sunday. Happy birthday.
And like any therapy, speech requires a bit of a foundation. For example, you wouldn't be able to have a person who couldn't focus in the hospital trying to work with executive functioning. You can't have a person try to speak sentences who can't speak syllables. And so after this year had gone by, we actually were working with him in a much more intensive technique called melodic intonation therapy. This technique is actually, you may be familiar with it because it made the news when Gabi Giffords was shot several years ago, and she lost her ability to speak because her left brain was affected with the bullet. She learned to regain her speech through singing. And this is a technique where basically you tap a rhythm and then you start humming and tapping and going back and forth. And you're going to see a very small snippet at this point of this young man. He had a device at that point that he would punch in, I want, and then he'd punch in what he wanted. And so what we did is we warmed up on wah, 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 wah to get him. And then I want cookie. You're going to see this going on now.
Wow. Good. I want cookie. 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 Excellent, excellent.
I had an experience many years ago of working with a young child who was basically, unfortunately, a drug baby. She was born with hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy and all sorts of other problems, but wonderful, wonderful little gal. And she fell in love with music. We actually worked on getting her to learn to play the piano. We're making tremendous progress on it, and she had a series of just brain functional problems, and it just went bad. She ended up, her oxygen levels went down so low that her doctor actually put her in hospice, and it was pretty devastating for all of us following this series of seizures. And I asked her mother, would it be possible to ask the doctor, can she continue her music during this? Because maybe it would help. And the doctor said, sure, fine, go ahead. And so we had her playing the harp. And in the case of, she had kind of a sense of stimming where she'd kind of do this a lot, but playing the harp brought everything out and got the chest opened up. So she started breathing with all that. And we had her singing. And this kid developed a pair of lungs like I have never heard before. It was amazing. It was wonderful. And through the singing, her oxygen levels came back up to the point where eventually they released her from hospice, which was very, very exciting. So this is a very direct benefit that singing can have. And I think especially in this time of COVID, we need to be aware of, it affects so many people's lungs. We can actually be proactive with helping with that. So another thing that music can be really helpful with is something we all know about dementia. There have been recent studies shown that the musical memory in the brain is actually stored in a different area than the physical memory it might be associated with. And so the physical memory may be gone, but we can still refer to the musical memory. And I wanted to ask all of you, have you seen people with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia respond to music where all of a sudden they just pop out of their shell? Daniel, what have you seen?
Yes, I speak to retirement centers on a pretty regular basis, and one notable one is at Spring Hill, Erie. And there are some residents that come in and they're virtually napping because it's the middle of the afternoon, number one, but number two, they just can't hold attention for very long. And I wonder that what I'm saying or what I'm playing is resonating, but I know because it's almost like little light bulbs light up in the room, because their eyes will suddenly light up, or they'll smile, or they may even hum or sing along to something that they find familiar, or is triggering something within them that suddenly like bring them kind of out of their quiet phase. And it's always stimulating, and it's always fun for me to realize that that's happening, because I know that they're responding where otherwise I may not feel like I'm making a connection by either talking or just playing music.
That's great. Tom, what have you seen?
Well, there were two things that I remember. One is a young man going to a church service in the summer in which they just were having a hymn sing. And I remember some older people who just seemed to be sitting there, very much not involved. But as the hymns went along, and they were things that they had sung when they were younger, and it meant a lot to them, all of a sudden they were involved. I had the same experience last Christmas. I did a Christmas carol sing at Spring Hill. And the room was full, and there were probably 7 or 8 that they sat there kind of motionless at first. By about half hour in, they were singing with everybody else because it was Christmas carols. It brought back happy memories, and there were things they had sung many, many times. And all of a sudden, everybody was involved. It was really exciting to see how people would be engaged from not even talking to people when they came in the room, just completely lost, to being very active, which was very gratifying. And I'll do it again.
Good for you. Maureen, what have you seen?
I have seen something similar to that as well. We have a senior center for our adults who perhaps are 40, 50, and decide it's time for them to quit work. And we do know that with the population of individuals with Down syndrome, we see an early onset of dementia. And so I too have gone to our senior center for our Christmas parties. And it is amazing to me how when we start the Christmas carols, all of a sudden everyone lights up. Some are joining in, some are not, but they're participating in whatever way they can. So this is just bringing to light to me so many different new ways we should be engaging our adults in singing.
Wonderful, wonderful. There's also really interesting research that shows when people are about to have a favorite piece of music, singing, whatever they're doing on that upon the anticipation of the reward, this great piece, this great part of the singing is coming up, that a shot of dopamine actually releases into the brain. And that on getting to that point, that goosebump point, that your favorite part of the song, that kind of thing, that there's actually a tiny bit of natural opioid release into the brain, followed by more dopamine. I think I would love to see more research on this. This was first explored with the Society of Music Perception and Cognition with some research from McGill University in 2015. But this has tremendous implications for also pain management with this kind of thing, and also for Parkinson's disease. Because Parkinson's is something that a lack of dopamine processing contributes to. And another way that we can help with Parkinson's and voice is Parkinson's choirs. And what we're going to do now is we're going to see a part of a YouTube video, and this is out on YouTube, that it shows the Parkinson's Choir of North Florida with their participants showing how much help they get from that.
Our mission is to, number one, go to choir every Wednesday. But the people with Parkinson's are there primarily to work on saving their voices. Parkinson's has many symptoms, and one of the side symptoms is losing your voice. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Music therapy really helps people with Parkinson's disease because we work on a lot of the same things that transfer over into speech. A lot of the exercises that we do focus on their breathing, focus on their voice volume and their articulation.
Well, some of it comes from just practice, just increased, they call it phonatory effort, just giving those muscles a workout so that they don't get weak. There's also some really interesting research with animals that, and some limited research with people that shows that listening to music and even singing music helps increase dopamine production. And dopamine is one of the things that people with Parkinson's are missing. It's the main characteristic of Parkinson's. They have a deficiency of dopamine. So part of it could be just from strengthening those muscles, and part of the benefits that we see could have to do with increased dopamine production from listening to or singing music. We really need more research to find out exactly what the mechanism is.
My voice before I started choir was on its way, and it saved me. This choir has been tremendously important to me. If I don't go to choir for 2 weeks, my wife kicks me in the butt and says, "Get to choir, I can't hear you anymore." And just the 1 day a week of practice, of doing the vocal warm-ups, makes a tremendous difference in my life.
Daniel, what do you think about this kind of opportunity that could potentially happen in Erie?
I think it's incredible. I think it's definitely something that I'm inspired by, and I would love to see if there was a way that we could form something like this in Erie. I'm very excited about what Tom Brooks has brought back to our community. I know he had a stint in Erie, went away, and has now come back in his retirement, and retires definitely in quotation marks when it refers to Tom Brooks, because he hit the ground running. He's very active on the board of the Philharmonic, and of course he's also now the director of the Philharmonic Chorus, and he also founded the Junior Philharmonic Chorus to provide a really amazing opportunity for talented high school students to sing. But to think that we could also offer some sort of a therapeutic opportunity or a way to make singing really have an impact on people's lives and help in healing in some regard, it's just mind-blowing to me. It's something I would really love to investigate.
That's great.
I would agree with that. Daniel, I think that there are many things that we need to investigate in our community and how we can reach out and get to more people about how singing really benefits their lives.
So, of course, in this day and age of COVID, unfortunately, choirs aren't going to be able to meet for a while. But we can all take advantage, I think, of singing, maybe even at home, and either for fun or for health or whatever. And, we had talked about singing raising the oxygen levels. Tom, can you give us a breakdown of what happens physiologically when you're singing, the benefits of singing, what all is going on with the body?
Well, I think there are several things that happen that can be of great benefit to us. Number one, when we sing, we tend to try to get a really good posture. And that posture opens up the rib cage significantly. It also helps us psychologically. I mean, when you have good posture, you feel better about yourself than when you're slumped over all the time. So psychologically, it helps you. Secondly, as you take a deeper breath, you get more oxygen into your body. And you not only just get it in, but by singing, you're actually learning how to space it out, and you're learning how that oxygen is controlled in your body over a period of time, so that it's not just a quick release. It's got some sustaining power in what we do. As we get older, the voice also tends to get brittle, and it's good to keep it going and moving. It opens up sinuses. I mean, I find I have asthma. When I start to sing, I probably cough for the first 5 minutes while it's clearing everything out. But then when it's done, when I'm done with that, I feel better. I can breathe more easily. And I think that you get that physical benefit from it. There's an enormous psychological benefit from it. And you don't have to be singing real difficult literature. You can sing anything. I mean, you can sing hymns if that means something to you. You can sing folk songs. You can sing popular songs. You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine, or Show Me the Way to Go Home. You know, I mean, anything that you can sing is a great expression. It physically motivates you. It gets you energized, and it changes the brain. The brain starts to function differently than just speaking. So it benefits us so much. Even just 15 minutes a day of doing that will benefit you immensely.
Wonderful. Tom and Daniel, would you have recommendations on just a basic routine that people could follow just to kind of get them going for something they could do at home with? Would it be straight songs, vocalizing, you know, anything like that?
One thing I notice, Tom, whenever I attend a choral rehearsal is that almost invariably they start with a warm-up period. And that warm-up period could be as little as 5 to 6 minutes, and sometimes it extends into 12, 15 minutes. And I wonder if the benefits aren't just physical, getting the voice warmed up, as it were, but also psychological in that I've seen some doctors where it's very clear that they're also trying to build some consensus. They're also trying to build a framework that sets up the way that we're going to work in this rehearsal and what we're going to accomplish. What sorts of things do you think about when you devise or put together a vocal warm-up for the chorus?
Well, I look at the literature we're going to do on a specific evening, and then I try to introduce a vocal principle that can be carried over that music so that there's a relationship that goes back and forth. The other thing that I do is when I come in, I read the room. You know, you sort of have to look at folks. If they're really down, you got to start energetically and you got to get them going. So there's a physical aspect to this. There's a group dynamics aspect to it, that people have been away from each other and all of a sudden they're coming together. And you want to do something that brings them together. Sometimes I'll even use a piece of music as part of the warm-up, something that's not vocally very difficult, but I can teach a principle through it and I can get them to feel like they're together again, that they're working together, which is one of the great social aspects of being in a choir. The sense that you belong to a group, that you are doing something with people. And singing is so personal to begin with, because unlike playing an instrument, you know, you are the instrument, you are the player and the instrument. And so you really have to, you know, it's very personal when you sing. So getting all those people to join together with that kind of thing, vocally, yeah, warm the voice up some, but by the time I get to evening, their voices are pretty warm. They've been speaking all day long. So it's more of getting maybe the registers out a little bit, getting some energy, getting some cohesive aspect of being together again. And you sort of just read the room, whether it should be 10 minutes of working on something today or 3 minutes. You sort of have to read what they are, where they are that evening.
Maureen, when you have your students who enjoy music, singing, what kinds of routines do you do with them?
Again, it's very much individualized based upon the developmental needs of the children. But what I'm thinking about after this dialogue today is just how this can be incorporated into our group homes. You know, our adults are now pretty much sheltered within and continue to be. But how are we going to incorporate singing into their daily routine in the homes? And I think I hear all the values of doing that. So I'm really going to go back and encourage our staff to do so. And also our families. In this period where they have their child at home and they're doing as Daniel, they're teaching the ABCs or whatever, this also should be a part of their daily curriculum.
Well, and a lot of other things we can do at home. We can actually, there are tech tools that we can use to help ourselves with at home. There's actually a really interesting tool called Hyperscore. And I actually saw a demonstration of this again at the SMPC meeting in 2015. And it was developed by MIT engineers. It is Windows-based only right now, but it's a tool that people who wouldn't be capable of reading music can actually use to create music. It's a visual tool, and it inspired me, actually. I was asked by the Chattanooga Public Library system last year to create a methodology for persons with autism and neurotypical to sound and learn to play together. And I devised this visual score so that they could actually learn visually for those who didn't have the capability of learning to read music. This is Mary Had a Little Lamb, by the way. And Hyperscore is very similar, where it's a visual type representation, so you don't have to learn to read music on that. Another wonderful piece of software is NoteFlight. And NoteFlight Learn also. These are both scoring type things, but NoteFlight Learn is actually a music education product where you can have your own virtual classroom on this and set up so that your kids can work with that. Some apps that create beats, melodies, and harmonies that can be tried. BandLab and GroovePad and Amplify Groovebox. Those are all things that you can kind of work with at home, again, to just kind of enjoy and have fun with and make music with. I think the whole thing is to really be in tune with the music right now. I want to also give a few books as resources if people want more information on this. The first of these books, Music Motor Control in the Brain by Eckfart Altmuller. If you're a musician who really loves to know what's going on in my brain as a musician, this is the book for you. This is basically an interesting outcome of all of the music research that's been done, and fabulous amounts of music research, is that musicians have been used as control groups in many situations, because the researchers want to see what does this protocol do against the musical brain and the person who is the non-musician. And so they found all kinds of interesting things. And this book is all about musicians' disorders, like what is actually happening with focal dystonia, which is the disorder where there's kind of a cramping process. Leon Fleischer, very famous pianist, is an example of this. And they found in the brain what's happening with our muscles. We have two sets of muscles everywhere. We flex, we extend, flex, extend, flex, extend. And the muscle overuse leads to the part of the brain saying, I'm going to flex and extend at the same time, and the cramp. So that's the kind of information in this book. Really interesting stuff. Dan Levitin wrote This Is Your Brain on Music. This is a very easy read to see all of the things that are happening as music is going into the brain. Really, really nice book on that. Oliver Sacks' Musicophilia, discussing various neural problems in the brain that he has seen. Of course, very famous neurologist, died a couple of years ago. And various neural problems that he's seen in the brain with music helping and directing and being therapeutic. And finally, the Handbook of Neurologic Music Therapy. This is the scientific basis of all of the neurologic music protocols, the speech, motor, and cognition protocols. And this is something that you definitely want to read as a music therapist. It is kind of the tome that everybody reaches for and considered the source on that. Some websites I'd also like to leave you with if you're in search of a music therapist. And I will also say that Erie is very fortunate because Mercyhurst College actually has a music therapy degree program. So that is a wonderful thing for Erie. But if you're in search of a music therapist, the American Music Therapy Association, they are musictherapy.org. You can go there and you can search for a school, you can search for a therapist, you can search for all kinds of things. If you are in search of a music teacher, if you look at this broadcast and say, maybe it's time to learn to play the piano, where can I find a piano teacher? Where can I find a voice teacher to do this? A great source is Music Teachers National Association. That's mtna.org. And it's a national association that filters down to state levels and then filters down past that to city levels and county levels. If you're interested in my nonprofit organization, Music Therapy Gateway in Communications, that is mtgic.org. There may be other people out there also who are interested in a TED Talk that I gave a few years back. If you Google Dance of the Neural Tango, and we're putting a screenshot up here of where you can get the YouTube video on this. Also, of course, very important, the Erie Philharmonic websites. We've got listings here for the home base of the Erie Philharmonic. We have the From Home series that you can go to find out more information there. We have the Erie Philharmonic Chorus that you can go to, and also the YouTube channel. So that's some information that you can take and find out some more on. And if any of you have any questions on music therapy, feel free to throw them out at me. And if not, we'll turn it back over to Daniel for any other comments.
Well, Martha, this has been a fabulous discussion. I've learned a lot about music therapy. It's made me actually rethink some of the things that I do and the way that I connect music to people, and to some degree just think about the raw physicality of music making and how that can help us and make us feel more healthy, but also the emotional aspects of music making. And Tom really drove home this idea of the community getting together and taking something that you love and something that's very personal to you, the sound of your own voice, and making it a part of a whole, I think, is something that just makes music all the more wonderful. So I'll talk about during this time particularly what's missing from our lives, which is the fact that musicians love to study and hone their own craft, but at the end of the day, the payoff for us is to share that with other human beings, is to share that with a room full of people that are there as willing recipients and are ready to listen to the music that we've spent our lives crafting and honing. So that's certainly something that we're all looking forward to, and getting to the point where we can share music in live settings again and be able to interact with people, because there is a palpable connection that we all feel as performers when we have an audience that's responsive to us, whether they're responsive through their applause or whether they're being responsive through rapt silence or just the way that they interact or the way that they breathe in the room. It's something that I think that we as performers have our antenna up always, willing and ready to receive. So I'm really grateful for that. Maureen, I'm also really grateful to you and to all the wonderful work that you're doing at the Barber National Institute. This is a treasure that we have in the Erie community. I had the lovely opportunity of meeting some of the residents and some of the students before the pandemic, and I really hope to be invited back, because there's just so many wonderful things to learn and to share with all the wonderful staff and all the students and residents that are there at the Institute. And Tom, I want to say thank you for all the life that you've re-injected into music making in the community, and particularly as it applies to the choral art. And it's obvious that you love what you do. It's obvious that you have a passion for the repertoire and for the great composers, and we certainly share that passion. And I'm very grateful to have a willing partner on the side of the Erie Philharmonic. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all music teachers and all music therapists and everyone who understands what music can do and is continuing to learn what music can do to make people feel better, make them interact better. And boy, don't we need that at this time, not only through the pandemic, but what's going on in our world is this idea that we are all one part of a community, and that we all have something, wonderful skills and talents to bring, and that we should capitalize on that and take advantage of the fact that music making is a community effort, and one that really will make our world better if we put a little bit more focus into it. Mm-hmm. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for tuning in, and special thanks, of course, to Martha Summa-Chadwick, Tom Brooks, Barber-Carey, and to everyone in the Erie community for tuning in and joining us for this coffee chat with Daniel Meyer. This is Daniel Meyer from the Erie Philharmonic. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.